doing exactly what I was told. I used to work as a driver for a freight company. We used to handle awkward-sized items that no other couriers would touch. We delivered everything from coffins to tractor parts. We also had to collect things from our customers for delivery the next day. This company had a mixture of contractors and permanent drivers. I was a relief driver. I knew most of the routes, so I covered holidays or sickness. The management of the depot consisted of a delivery manager and a collection manager. These two people didn't quite see eye to eye, as sometimes getting the stuff delivered conflicted with getting stuff collected, and their targets reflected failures in a bad way. This particular day, I had to cover a contractor's route. I didn't know the route, so as we had to load our trucks, this took a little longer than usual. I had around 45 deliveries that day, which is high for this predominantly rural route. I asked my manager, the delivery manager, if he knew the route. He replied that he did and ordered my route for me, so I was good to go, albeit a bit late. I did say that with the volume I had, I may struggle, and I asked him to keep an eye out for me. He said okay. I got to near midday and realized that I wasn't going to be able to complete all the deliveries, and the collections wouldn't get done either. I also noted that one of the collections was off-route and the contractor had a vehicle in that area anyway. I called in and spoke to my manager, delivery, and told him he had a choice of collections or deliveries. I also asked why the contractor couldn't cover the off-route collection. I was told to call back later and he'll see if can sort something out. He also said that the off-route collection would have to be done too. I called back later and asked for help again. He said there was no help available. So I gave him the option of deliveries or collections, as there wasn't time to do both. I will get to the time a bit later. He categorically said both had to be done. The delivery manager went home, so I called in again and got the collection manager. She reiterated that there was no help at all. So either I failed the deliveries or failed the collections. If that happened, I'd have been hauled into the office the next day. So cue malicious compliance. I called into one of the collections and I asked what time they closed. 6:30 p.m. they said. So I said I'd be back later. I carried on with the deliveries, which took me further away from that collection. At the appropriate time, I stopped delivering and drove to the collection. I collect 2 small parcels. That was all. I then drove back to where I had stopped and carried on delivering. This cost me about an hour. I finished my last delivery at 7:15 p.m. I had a 45-minute drive back to my yard. As I was leaving the round, I got a frantic call from the collection manager. She was wondering where I was. I told her what had happened and told her that I'd asked for help 4 times and was told I had to do everything allocated, so I did, and it wasn't my fault that it happened like this. Here's where the trouble really started. The company's trunking system is a fluid one. It depends on trucks leaving the depot at a certain time. For our depot, the cutoff time is 7:30 p.m. I wheeled in at just after 8 p.m. There were 15 pissed-off guys on overtime waiting for me to turn up and an articulated truck waiting for these 2 parcels. This wait caused the whole trunking system to be late the next day. My routing was discussed when I got back, as it was questionable at best. When I told the collections manager that it was the delivery manager that organized it. There were angry emails between the delivery and collection managers, and I would imagine that the logistics team would have demanded an explanation too. Arses were definitely kicked. The next day, no one said a word. I wasn't on that route, and going forward, well, for a little while, they either helped when I asked or didn't get me to do as much. Also, as I had exceeded legal driving time, they had to make sure I went home early for a few days, so a bit of a win there. The biggest trouble these guys had was they always assumed that the drivers were after an easy day, and even when presented with the evidence assumed that you were still trying to be fly. This time it bit them badly.
It doesn't look like you have enough to do. Got my first career job in a local government, keeping tabs on its real estate and the legal documents relating to said real estate. I'm wet behind the ears. My first 40-hour-per-week career job. This was a time when multitasking was a huge buzzword in business, and it seemed every single job I applied for required someone with good multitasking skills. I thought it was bullshit. I worked best when only working on one task at a time and managing my workload via a daily time allotment schedule. That is, I'd schedule my work in 15-minute lumps when I got in the morning and work on those tasks. That way, I never missed a deadline or had a project fall between the cracks. For example, some tasks got slotted 2 hours, some whole days, some just 15 minutes. I love to keep my desk clean. All tasks that appeared in my physical inbox were sorted and prioritized. The paperwork was then filed, and the task scheduled for later that day or later in the week depending on how urgent it was. Consequently, my desk was always empty, save one folder and a few maps related to the folder. Once one task was done, that folder and its maps were filed, a new folder and its maps were retrieved. One afternoon, my direct boss walks in, looks at my desk with its one folder and 2 maps, looks at my clean-topped filing cabinets, looks at my empty inbox, physical one you actually put paper/folders in. Grunts. Walks out. 20 minutes later, my boss strides back into my office, drops 18 inches of folders and papers onto my inbox. States proudly and firmly, "Worker, it doesn't look like you have enough to do. This should keep you busy." He smiled and strutted back to his cluttered office. It was busy work. 3 weeks of mind-numbing paperwork. Nothing outside of my work description. Just more like duplicate files, old contracts, unorganized paperwork, and/or outdated maps. In dealing with the dump's aftermath, I learned my lesson. While doing my actual job was important, it was equally important that hard work appear to be happening so I could do my actual job. I started saving old files, old maps, and old legal documents. I rebound up papers that normally would have been recycled into legitimate-looking folders. I transformed my office into a duplicate of my boss' chaotic file and paper hellscape. My inbox always had papers and folders in it. Height and number would vary daily. Never empty. I had folders piled on top of the file cabinets, folders in stacks on the floor. 24 of those white office boxes packed with files towering around my work area. I even had a map rack with old maps rolled up in it. My office looked utterly cluttered. I even took to walking everywhere with a steno pad, a file folder, and sometimes a map under my arm. Didn't matter where. Getting coffee? Pad and file. Pooping? Pad and file. Pointless meeting? Pad. 2 files. Actual necessary and productive meeting. Pad. Relevant file. Relevant map. Every morning, right after scheduling my real work, I would shuffle the fake folders and paper around my desk and work area. Move the boxes about every 2 weeks. But in all that visual chaos, I kept one area of my desk clean where the real work happened. One day, my boss peeked into my office, the door bumping into a stack of 3 full, white boxes placed behind it, preventing it from fully opening. A single file fell off the top, spilling its guts all over the floor. He looked around, paused at the mess he just made, then, sorry about that. What you working on?" I rattled off 3 of the highest priority properties on the current week's schedule and the tasks for each. "All right, I'll give this to someone else," and walked on down the hall. I'd already completed those tasks. "You just need to prioritize, soon, ex-boss. I have been working in IT for the last 10 years. 4 of those in the company I am just leaving. I joined this company after a few bad experiences with coworkers and bosses. After getting to know some of the staff in the company, I was really happy about the coworkers and colleagues because most of them seemed to be really friendly. Into my second year at the company, I felt like we were understaffed in IT. Not a bad still, I thought. That was up until our workload increased. Before we could handle the daily stuff and projects, and on top could do some system upgrades over the year. Now, we were getting more and more work due to new regulations from corporate and more software that needed to be supported. During this time, I started asking my team leader to look for a new guy. We needed more hands. After a year of bringing this up at least once per month, my boss started with his speech about, "You just need to prioritize your work." Of course, this would not help if the work is at like 110% of the load that the current team could handle. We increased our hours and could get it done, but that was only for half a year. At this point, I was done with this whole ordeal. Corporate IT got more and more hostile if you did not message some people directly, what was prohibited normally, and on top I saw people left and right leaving. After around 3 years of being with the company, I saw our trainee leave. I talked to him about pay and why he wanted to leave. Not to deter him, but to understand his reasoning and show my support. And at that point, I have been passively looking for a job for about 6 months. I was at this time talking to my team leader and telling him that he needs to increase my salary by around 8% at least and bring more hands to the team. He was asking me why I wanted to leave. I told him about the problems that he knows and said that I can't bring myself to stay in this company with the problems the team is facing. I just need to prioritize myself. He did not react, unfortunately, but I think he got the point. As a side note, later I heard from my boss, basically the one above my team leader and me, that my team leader has never asked for more people. And to be honest, I want to trust this guy because he was sincere all the time as far as I know. The food is bad. My son has some special needs and is a reluctant reader and writer. He has never before taken initiative to read or write on his own. He is so enthusiastic about lots of other parts of learning. He is an OT and speech and has an IEP. He is, however, very gifted at finding the loophole in everything. It's entertaining and exasperating, and sometimes I'm just in awe. I made him lunch today, some chicken, rice, fresh fruit, and some snap peas, all things he normally likes. I thought it was a nice lunch. While he was eating, I had to make a call to schedule an appointment. He said, "I don't like this. This tastes bad. I want something else. I don't want this for lunch." Since I was on the phone, I said, "Eat what you can, please. I'm on the phone, and I don't want to hear you complain about your lunch again." He was very quiet for the next few minutes as I finished up my call. Then he handed me a piece of paper. My kid, who has never wanted to read or write, who I often have to sit with and do it with him the entire time, wrote for the first time on his own. It was a passive-aggressive note. He wrote for the first time to make a complaint. The note said THFOD is bad. I'm really proud and a little offended, but mostly proud. And, technically, I had not heard him complain about his lunch again, so I am not able to attach a photo of the note here, but I hung it on the fridge and told him I was very proud of him for writing it all by himself.
Whatever you do, don't speak French. This happened in school when I was around 15. It was in a French-speaking region, and my English class had a very strict but somewhat sassy teacher, Miss Jones. The one golden rule was no French. You had to speak in English no matter what, except emergencies, of course. Miss Jones wasn't messing around, but she had a sense of humor. For example, one day, during recess, someone wrote on the board, "Miss Jones is a beach." When she saw it, she started screaming, "What is wrong with you? I'm not a beach."
IMAB zviezdica CH.
Then she spelled correctly the word and wrote it on the board. She added, "Besides, it's not a bad thing. It stands for a babe in total control of herself." One day in class, Miss Jones mentioned war, and a student didn't know what that word meant. So Miss Jones starts explaining it in English. The student doesn't get it. Other students pitch in, still in English, to no results. This goes on for some time. I get fed up and say, "This is a waste of time. Can we just translate the word in French and move on?" Miss Jones answers, "Well, if you're so smart, why don't you explain what it means?" And no French. All right, I start making pow-pow noises, explosions, imitating warplanes, the whole deal. Takes 3 seconds to the student to yell, "I get it."
Thank you so much for watching the video. For more videos like this, please subscribe.